Take a look at this photo taken in Portskewett, South Wales. This is Harold's Field. It's dotted with mysterious lumps and bumps, and I reckon it's going to be a real cracker of a site. Picture the scene. It's 1065, the year before the Battle of Hastings, and Harold Godwinson, soon to be king, is riding up this slope looking for a site for his brand new hunting lodge fit to entertain royalty. Why here? Well, it's always been strategically important. It's on the main crossing point for anyone wanting to go from England through to Wales. The Romans built here, the Welsh had a royal palace here, but amazingly, no one's ever dug here. Up till now. Time Team have got just 3 days to find out what really is under Harold's Field. Most of us know King Harold as a loser, the Saxon king killed by an arrow in the eye at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. But what many people won't know is that he was actually a very successful warrior in the years before he became king. As Earl of Wessex, he owned land that bordered Wales, and personally, as a big fan of Harold, I'm looking forward to finding out what he was doing here in Portskewett. The reason why no one's ever dug here at Harold's Field before is that way back in 1928, it was deemed so historically important that they made it a scheduled ancient monument, which means nobody's allowed to excavate it. But this is Kate Smith, who lives locally, don't you?
I do. I live over the road in Sudbrook.
And Kate organised this petition. Would you like to see a professional excavation at Harold's Field? That was very enterprising of you. Why did you do that?
Well, because nobody knows for certain what's under the field, and we have a lot of very curious villagers who would love to know.
The Welsh band together, and we have a great big gang that come and kill the builders and seize all the goods that are assembled here by Harold for hunting and building. So we're not even dealing with a complete building, it appears.
So the Welsh burnt down Harold, the Englishman's holiday home?
Yes. There's a bit of a pattern there, isn't there?
But for the archaeologists, this dig is about more than just looking for Saxon evidence. This ridge of higher ground was on the main route for anyone crossing the River Severn, and there are clues to suggest that this field was occupied over many centuries. Local pottery expert Steve Clark has dug several trenches in the area and found Iron Age, Roman and medieval finds all around the edges of Harold's Field.
When you say you've got medieval pottery from here, what sort of date is that in the
Well,
medieval?
it's a job to say. It's probably 13th century. Could be 14th, but it's not really closely datable because there's not enough of it.
So not Harold yet, then?
No Saxon pottery. There's one sherd from southern Wales.
So if we got something Saxon, that would be
We'd
a big
recognise
story.
it, yeah. Yes, it would be really big.
Key to understanding this site will be making sense of the lumps and bumps. Geophys are busy trying to detect what lies beneath them, while Henry's collecting data to make a 3D model. And Stuart seems to be studying them from every angle. He hasn't spotted anything Saxon yet, but he reckons he can see traces of something that would be later in date, a medieval manor. And no sooner does the trench go in at the bottom of the hill than straight away Phil spots the first find.
I mean, how did I see that?
Not wrong with his eyesight, is there?
See, you don't need your hands to do archaeology. Just need your old eyes. That's the way. So what we need now
Is a pottery expert.
It's medieval.
what is medieval?
I think it is.
When you say medieval in this instance, refine that a bit more.
Somewhere around 1200.
Ooh!
That would be good.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't think
top five
I didn't think you were going to say that early.
No, it could well be.
It's a bit nice though, isn't it, eh?
Then just with it, we've only just...
It's a great start. We've come straight down on medieval pottery dating to around 1200 AD. So Stuart could be right, and there is a completely unknown medieval manor house here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Is what goes on in there?
Well, it's a bit more degraded in there, but there's definitely there's bits of stone coming up.
It's a wall, is it?
Yeah. It's kind of square. It looks like that squared off piece there fitted in a wall or something.
Yes.
Matt reckons there's at least one large collapsed building here, but at the moment it's hard to see because of all the rubble. It looks like we might have another building at the other end of the trench. And I'm glad I'm not the one who's got to sort it out.
That's a
Yeah.
wall. And dressed.
Yes, absolutely.
Unlike all this rough, undressed rubble, this is actually
And that's the only bit of dressed stone
Yes,
we've
quite.
found.
quite.
But could this map, dated 1777, contain a clue to what one of the buildings looked like?
And look at the name of the field,
Tower Hay.
Tower Hay.
Yeah.
Now I think that tower field name applies to the fact that there's these big lumps and bumps on the top here, and there was a memory that was a tall building or a stone tower, perhaps an old manor house, but there's a memory of a stone building in this field.
Stuart now believes that most of the bigger earthworks are part of the medieval manor house, and this is an exciting discovery in itself. It's possible that these lost medieval buildings could be very early, perhaps even dating back to the period just after the Norman conquest.
And you can see you've got the coast out here with all the mud flats. See all these lines on here? These are medieval strip fields, i.e. this wasn't flooded in the medieval period because they were able to plough it. But there are areas where you can see stream channels and areas that don't have ploughing on. Could this be where you could bring boats up to our site?
The theory is that there was a tidal creek known locally as a pill running close to our site. It may well have looked something like this one, which is only a couple of miles away. Phil's going to help with the search for the lost creek, and he's wondering what the harbour at Portskewett might have looked like. I've been looking round the sides of this hill for most of today because, quite frankly, the archaeology up here on the top was so complicated. I wanted to give the archaeologists time to have a really good look. The big news is that Matt reckons he's revealed a doorway into one of our medieval buildings.
That's lovely, isn't it?
Door jam coming out there. It's just come up now.
Making a nice space for the timber door to fit into.
Yeah, door in there. Opens
Yeah.
out.
We've got a doorway here into one building, and we've also uncovered two walls that are clearly part of a separate building. And both walls, bizarrely, have been made without using mortar.
If you build a good solid stone wall, gravity will actually hold it in place for you.
Without having any mortar?
Yeah, with no mortar.
Until it begins to fall down, because then it seems to have crashed right down the hill, gravity assisting in its collapse.
On top of Ian?
Yeah.
Ian's up to his neck in rubble, but he's also finding a lot of medieval roof tile.
But underneath this rubble here, we've had this layer of roof tiles, which I think means that the building didn't fall down, it was brought down, demolished. They took the roof off, threw away what they didn't want, and then they took the walls down and threw down all this rubble on top of the roof.
It's taking a lot of time, but we're slowly making sense of these medieval buildings. And up in the helicopter, Stuart's ready to report to Mick. He reckons he's worked out where the creek ran up to Portskewett.
The church sits on a little promontory of high ground. Can you see that
I can
dipping
see
down?
the edge of that, yeah.
The low ground, you can trace in a channel out towards that electricity
Oh,
pylon.
yes, I can see it going across the field.
You can see the channel to the right carrying on.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, that's the line of the original creek.
Phil's boat at the moment is here, and he's looking from water level at what would once have been the entrance point into the creek.
So literally everything that's forming the shore now is silted up.
Yes, it looks like featureless mud flat, but in fact that's changed with the new medieval seawall coming in and could have been our pill during the early medieval period.
Colin, if you were coming into a harbour here, what can you tell me? Would it be a favourable place for a harbour?
Well, yes. First of all, the tide would have pushed you nearly right up here, having bounced off the English stones, and then the last little bit with the westerly wind as we have now, you would have just sailed straight in, which is exactly what we're doing. And if we go very much further, we're going to be on the shore.
We better turn around and go back.
Ready, Mark? Well, that's great. We've located the long-lost creek that once connected Portskewett with the Severn Estuary, allowing boats to reach here from places like Bristol, just across in England, and the wider world beyond. But was the creek still flowing when our manor house stood proudly on this hill? The news is that we've got enough pottery now to date these medieval buildings.
You've got a good idea, because the pottery is, a lot of it's from Bristol, and it's a type of pottery which doesn't come in until the second half of the 13th century and goes out in the 14th.
In our trench here at the bottom of the hill, much of the day's been spent investigating this ditch. which we can now confirm also belongs to the medieval manor. But it's meant that we haven't had time to investigate the layers Phil pointed out to me this morning. With Roman pottery at the bottom and medieval at the top, we could have a layer of Saxon history in the middle. I've been promised we'll definitely find out tomorrow. Day 3 here in Portskewett in South Wales, and our last chance to find evidence of Harold's Saxon hunting lodge thought to have been in this field. What we've learnt so far is that many of the big lumps and bumps here belong to a 13th century manor house, which is causing a lot of excitement at the moment.
There's all this work stone coming, and we found this lovely worked bit there.
Look at that.
So we took that out, thinking it was rubble, and underneath, another one the same, and another one the same, all stacked up on top of each other.
What about that as well?
Oh yeah.
There's 2 more there, look. Well, that's fantastic. That's the side of a doorway, I would have thought.
Ah, the door jamb.
Well, yes, and you've presumably got a stack of them.
These stones were part of the door. Slowly, we're starting to build up a picture of what these buildings look like.
You see, it sticks
Oh yes,
out.
yes.
So
yes.
I guess maybe those or similar stones would have been on there.
That would make sense, as that's the doorway there, and you're coming into something this way.
Yeah.
And if you're coming into something, then presumably this earthwork and this parched grass is the inside of it.
Mm.
Oh, I just wonder if this isn't the tower that the field's named after.
Well away from the medieval rubble, we're going to have one last stab at finding some earlier structures on this hill. Our last trench is going in here. If we're lucky, this bit of the field might not have been built on in medieval times, and we might come straight down on some Saxon evidence.
Oh, that's nice medieval, isn't it?
That is nice medieval.
That's very nice. What, 13th century, I think?
That's still early then.
Yeah, that's nice.
There's so much good archaeology here that Phil will be happy whatever we find. But personally, I'll be disappointed if we can't find anything to prove the Saxons were at least here in 1065 AD. I'm told my best chance is in this trench. Here we've exposed a series of layers in the slope of the hill that could allow us to get at any Saxon evidence if it's here.
Ooh. So how are you getting on then, Tracy? That's looking interesting.
Yeah, it's not what we expected. We were peeling off this redeposited clays forming the terrace to find the earlier ground surface.
And is it coming off easily at that level?
It is, it's just peeling off of this.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Oh,
look at that.
That is definitely the level, then, isn't it?
But what we didn't expect was this yellow degraded sandstone.
The top layers, which have now been removed, dated to 1200 AD. They were put down to create a terrace on the side of this hill, and it looks like similar terracing has been going on in much earlier times. Could this be evidence of activity here in the Saxon period? Mick tells me it's rare to find Saxon pottery, but we have to hope for some dating evidence as Tracy carefully unpicks these layers.
A worn coin of Harold, I think.
I'll do my best with.
But right now we're running out of time. The villagers who invited us here are turning up to see what we've been able to discover about Harold's Field. And in Matt's trench, we're nearly ready to tell them. We're down deep enough to find the floor of this building.
Oh, at last! Excellent. What is it? What are they made? That's stone.
Yeah, it's not sandstone. These are harder. These are limestone, I guess.
Strange thing, it doesn't seem to be. It seems to be lower than the bottom of the wall there, doesn't it?
This is so typical of you, Mick Aston. We're all working away in the freezing wind over in the field, and you're sloping off to the church.
We're working away on the church.
Rick reckons we can tell the villagers when the manor house was built. This church dates to the early 1100s, and he's noticed it's got similar stonework to this bit which he's lugged across from Matt's trench.
Well, I mean, I would suggest that you could put it almost exactly into that doorway.
It's the same type of stone, even though the colour looks different, doesn't it?
Same block size, same detailing.
The windows have been added in the early 1200s, and they too are a match for some of our dressed stones, suggesting that our manor house was altered at the same time. So that one, we're comparing with this one.
Yeah, so we can, by comparison with this window, suggest that perhaps in the early 13th century there's a significant alteration to that great tower that Matt's working.
So, Mick, what do you think is the relationship between this church and what we've got over there?
I think it's a very direct relationship which you see all over the country, which is the manor house has the church next to it. And that's usually because they start out as the private property of the people in the manor house. It's only later they get dragged away and become the parish church.
The church and manor house were probably built by the same stonemasons. But can we now say which bits of the manor house we've been digging up?
I think what we're looking at here is the doorway into a 12th century tower. I mean, it's magnificent. Inside you've got the floor, and then you go out through the doorway, over the threshold.
That's that big stone down there.
That's that big slab there. And then you're outside the building. Yeah. And then our trench turns right and goes down the hill. And what the trench has done is cut through a range of buildings along that side, which are later 13th century, and I think probably are likely to be a stable block. They've got a central sort of walkway going through.
We've got no later 13th century pottery from there anyway, have we? So it's not domestic.
No, I don't think it is.
So we know these big earthworks, sketched long ago in Harold's Field, are not the remains of Harold's Saxon hunting tower. And we can now reveal to the villagers what was under the lumps and bumps. The main building we unearthed was a Norman fortified tower house, likely to have been 3 stories high. Next to it there was a stable block, and these earthworks are likely to be a courtyard with ancillary buildings set around it. Encircling the hill was this deep ditch, and the impressive route in was across this causeway, with the creek on one side and a large lake of spring water on the other. This was the home of the local lord, but not the centre of power as it was in Harold's day, because in Norman times their base was at Chepstow Castle down the road. But what I hoped for was something to link this field with Harold. Did we get any pre-conquest pottery?
We've got some of the earliest medieval pottery ever found in Wales.
Really?
It's very exciting.
But is any of it proof that the Saxons were here?
We've just got a fragment out now. It could well be, pre-Norman, almost certainly, but...
Which bit's that?
It's a very small piece there. Right?
It's not too fanciful then to say that this could be from the time of King Harold?
No, not at all, because we know it's that much earlier in the sequence.
Well, it's not much, but finding this from a time when there simply wasn't much pottery feels like discovering the Holy Grail. This is chaff-tempered ware, and it's Saxon. I can hardly believe it. We can tell the locals that we found evidence of activity here just before the Norman conquest. And for me, it's proof enough that Harold was here. Our historian Sam is convinced that Harold would have built his hunting lodge on this important hill, intending it to stand out as a symbol of new power to anyone arriving in the creek below.
If you'd like to see more episodes like this, you can make it happen.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world. Enjoy front row seats for the greatest show on Earth and under it.
Ah! Oh, what's that?
What is it?
That's the trouble, we don't know what the quality of the floor was that Wimbold said he found. I mean, if it was a nice floor, or whether it was just these broken up bits of tile.
But the archaeologists have also identified a second target. Wimbold's records describe the Mancio as being surrounded by massive enclosure ditches. And Neil's keen to investigate these as soon as possible, because when it comes to getting dates for a site, ditches are an archaeologist's best friend.
I mean, I wonder, as a first starter for 10, whether this isn't actually going to be the natural bedrock. In which case, our building, and I think we can start to talk about a building because there's just so much demolition rubble, it's all tile, bits of tiles and what have you. That's in there. The other thing I like about it, that edge, look at it, it's exactly at 90 degrees to the Roman road.
Yeah.
I like the look of that.
But it's a bit early to break out the champagne. We may have our first piece of Mancio, but we don't know what piece it is or how it might help John decipher his abundant geophys results. To be honest, we don't even know which part of Wimbold's excavation this is. Only time and a lot more digging will tell how this small wall line fits into the bigger picture of Roman Alfoldean. a settlement that stretched along both sides of Stane Street.
Ah, now we're talking.
Is this the natural ear then, this stuff?
That's it. So that's the outside of the site. So we now know where we are.
Over in Trench 2, Rackshar and Matt have located the Mansio's enclosure ditches, or at least one of the ditches. Well, to be more precise, they found one side of one ditch. Why have you extended this?
Well, because we couldn't find an edge. You see, we thought the edge of the ditch was going to be about here, Tony.
Hang on, let's have a look over here. So this is...
See how soft that is? That's really soft, isn't it?
Yeah, let me get my trowel into that, no problem.
Yeah.
So this is fill. We're on top of a ditch here, and we couldn't find the edge of the ditch where we thought it should be.
It's that?
Absolutely.
It is this?
Yeah. So this is the actual natural undisturbed bedrock.
Yeah.
So we can work our way back the trench that way.
The problem is, the geophys results suggest that each ditch is at least 4 metres wide and possibly up to 4 metres deep. We'll be lucky to get to the bottom of them by the end of day 3. The size of these ditches and the half-kilometre of settlement geophys are now investigating shows Alfoldean was a major focus of Roman activity in West Sussex. About 11 o'clock this morning, Neil decided to put a tiny little discreet trench in here to see if he could find the ditch which would have once gone round the Mansio. But he couldn't see it, so he extended the trench, then he extended it again, then you extended it again and again. Was all this work really necessary?
Oh, totally, Tony. Look, here is the ditch.
Hooray!
Look, it's very soft fill, very black, full of fines. Now, just behind Ratcher, we get a change. Ratcher, can you just point out where we see the change in the earth?
Yeah, this is the lighter colour. The ditch is actually cutting into this. It's going down that way.
So one edge of the ditch there, and another ditch just there.
Where does that go to?
Well, who knows? I mean, perhaps over about as far as here.
So we're going to extend back to here as well?
We'll see how time goes, but come this way, Tony,
All right.
because this is really interesting. So think one ditch, think 2 ditches.
Yeah.
And then look, here we have, look at, very different. Yellowy clay. This must be the rampart bank inside the 2 outer ditches.
In this trench, we've got this wonderful floor, which for the first time in this trench means we've got intact archaeology.
Do you reckon this looks classy enough to be the officers' quarters?
Well, it's what Wimble called the officers' quarters, but forget the officers' quarters. You know, he's living in a fantasy world. This is part of the Mansio. This must be part of what he referred to as the pink corridor. So we know more or less where we are, but tomorrow the real challenge is going to actually work out the exact plan of the Mansio, because that will be a real achievement.
Or not. Just as we prepare for a manic afternoon of trenching, the heavens open and the clear wall lines of the Mansio and the obvious circularity of the circular feature disappear under a sea of muddy clay. Phil, we've dug in much worse weather than this, and even when everyone else has packed up, we've had to prise you out of the trench. So how come you've stopped?
It's so simple, it's a geology.
What do you mean?
Well, this ground here has just got so much clay in it that as soon as it starts to rain, it just puddles up. There's just no way it's going to drain away.
We've hatched a plan to buy us a few extra hours digging on this rain-sodden site. We're going to cover Phil's trench with this tent and use a digger to expose clean, dry archaeology in Miles's trench. Unfortunately, the conditions in the ditch trench make it too dangerous to dig, so at most we've only one more day to get to the bottom of it. But although we still don't have a date for these defences, Stuart thinks he now knows why they were constructed.
This is about control. If you want to go up and down this road, you have to go in one gate, out the other gate and over a bridge. It's about Roman imperial taxation. It was a way of easily generating revenue to support the army. In fact, I'm just quoting from some original sources here where regulations for taxes per capita. For each slave, 1.5 denarius for a horse, mare, jackass, mule, donkey, ox, half a denarius, and so on. If it moved, they taxed it. In effect, those defensive earthworks are it's like a big bonded warehouse, if you can put it like that.
Bridget, what have you done with the circularity?
It seems to have disappeared altogether.
Yeah.
When the machine is clearing back, we'll be able to see the features very clearly. But of course, now we've got rain again.
Yeah.
Water starts pooling, and it just is phasing it out again. And you can see these guys out here working in it. We've got to get them out because it's just too
Yeah,
wet
they're
and
making
claggy.
churning everything up, aren't they? Yeah, I think we ought to call it a day.
But it's not completely doom and gloom. Geophys have gallantly continued to survey this large waterlogged site, and John thinks a clear picture of Alfoldean's development is beginning to emerge. But it's getting late, so time to swap the cold, wet misery of the site for the cold, wet comfort of a pint. It was a frustrating afternoon.
Oh, very frustrating. This morning was going so well, and I thought, yeah, we can now see the walls. It can match it to John's geophysics. We're actually getting a plan of the Mancio. We got the site on the run, but yeah, we've been held up for sure. What do you think, John?
Well, I think if we take one of these strong anomalies that I think is probably a pit, and then we'll hopefully get some dating evidence.
Yeah, and we can compare pottery from that with material from the ditch, from the bank, and from the Mancio. It's build up a picture of how this site developed over time.
Are we actually going to be able to get inside the Mancio?
Oh, for sure. By tomorrow night, we'll know what a Roman bedroom in a hotel looks like.
Over the past 3 days, it's been a mausoleum, a Romano-British roundhouse, and then he lost it completely.
Miles, is it still here?
It's come back again. My circularity has returned. We've got what looks like the circular gully swinging right the way around the trench. So I still like the idea of that being a half, that sort of burning area in the middle, and this being a circular all around it.
But it's all Roman.
Yeah, it's all Romano-British.
So it looks like Miles's early suspicions were right. This is a Romano-British roundhouse built by the locals and part of the original settlement that was here when the Mancio was built. But this trench refuses to be straightforward.
There's a complicating factor in that just outside that circular feature, Ian's found a series of other pits. What have you got down there, Ian?
I've got a broken, but it appears to be fairly complete pot, just there.
What's just the outline?
God, I can see that, yeah. So that's the whole diameter of it, isn't it, there?
It looks like most of the pot. I mean, that's the fabric.
And you've got that sort of New Forest indented beaker.
I mean, that's useful, isn't it? Because that probably is going to be sort of 3rd century AD. So again, it shows the activity here outside the enclosure is contemporary with what's going on inside the enclosure. It's not earlier, it's contemporary.
We're also at last getting near to a story for the ditches that were at some point dug to separate and, we presume, protect the Mancio from the rest of the settlement.
Yep, here it is. You can see this huge, thick, yellow clay of the rampart.
Yeah.
You can see this brown stuff here.
Yeah.
That's an earlier ground surface, and the rampart has been slapped straight on top of it.
Yeah, and this is the stuff that's coming from under the rampart.
This is the stuff that's been sealed by the bank.
It's just what we've been wanting, isn't it?
This is a classic piece of archaeological dating. Because when these ditches were dug into the clay, the spoil was used to build a large rampart, sealing any finds on the ground surface underneath.
Does look as though we got the corridor as we first thought. What we didn't know was that it was going to turn through 90 degrees and go that way.
So this is actually the internal southeast corner of the building.
Exactly.
And the whole of the south range now we can sort of plot from behind us.
Precisely. You're in the corridor, I'm in the courtyard.
We're now getting an idea of just how impressive John's results are. Because with the help of the archaeology, we can filter out much of the noise on his original geophys to give us this. The actual floor plan of the Alfoldean Mancio. An impressive 2-storey coaching inn, complete with its bathhouse. And at the heart of a complex with paddocks, stables, and all the other services a traveller would have expected. And we're now standing in one of the bedrooms. Right, I'm a weary traveller at the end of the day. I've pulled up into the Mancio. What do I get for my money?
You're a very important person, Tony. You would get a room to yourself, I'm sure. Good sized room, in your cum, imagine your bed, perhaps a brazier. If it's cold in winter, warm your hands, chest. You could then go out, perhaps have your dinner in the dining room, have a bath, and maybe a few alternative attractions, perhaps a few girls or something like that.
Fantastic. Did everybody get a room on their own?
Almost certainly not. I think it would have depended on your status. I mean, some of these rooms you could easily fit a number of bunk beds in, so you could be literally sleeping with 10 goat herds or something like that.
No, I'm high status.
Sorry, you'll have a single goat herd.
What's that? This place lasted 150 years. Imagine how many people must have walked through the doors looking for a good night's sleep and a warm bath and a decent meal. There'd have been Roman soldiers and administrators and tax collectors and British traders all wandering through the rooms, admiring the mosaics, eating their food off the fine Samian ware and charging up their batteries for another day's journey down Stane Street. And quite frankly, after 3 pretty gruelling days in some fairly horrendous weather conditions, all of us will be only too glad to get back to the 21st century version of the Mansio just as soon as we finished our feast.
Join a thriving worldwide community of Time Team fans on Patreon.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world with more digs and greater access than ever before.
Castor is 5 miles west of Peterborough in Cambridgeshire. Nearly 2,000 years ago, it was right next to the important Roman town of Dura Brevi and less than a mile from Ermine Street, a major Roman road that's still visible from the air today. And over the last 400 years, antiquarians, archaeologists and even grave diggers have been discovering nuggets of Castor's intriguing past. We're also surveying the playing field of the next door school, as this is where an intriguing 19th century antiquarian said he found some Roman baths.
Well, here we are.
He was a man obsessed with Castor's archaeology, and he's buried right here.
Sacred to the memory of Edmund Tyrrell Artis, who died the 24th of December 18... it's a bit eroded. 47, in the 59th year of his age.
Edmund Artis had a remarkable mix of talents. A chocolate maker and a budding artist, he wangled himself a job working for landed gentry in the Castor area. He then found he had a passion for archaeology and became a one-man time team, digging all over the area and illustrating his efforts with beautiful drawings.
When there are slack periods during the work on the estate, Artis borrows labour from the estate and uses it for his excavations into archaeological sites.
And obviously he's going to have the blessing of the landowner because he works
he's
for him.
working for him, yes, that's right.
Ideal, really.
Absolutely,
isn't it?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. There are wonderful stories, for example, of him excavating through severe winters, where all the workmen clear off because it's too cold, but leave Edmund Artis digging away to his heart's content. So he was really a driven man, actually.
Artis also surveyed the whole village and published this map in 1828. It claims to show the location of lots of Roman buildings in and around the churchyard. But antiquarians, as we know, can be a bit unreliable. So we're going to test just how much of what Artis says is here can actually be found on the ground.
There's obviously a lot of commonality between what he mapped and what's still here.
What you doing, guys?
Well, what we're trying to do is look at, first of all, what Artis mapped in the early 19th century, and we've overlaid them against the modern base map so we can get some idea of where these features were. There are enough common features in there to be able to roughly work out where his buildings were and their orientation and so on.
Roman buildings?
Roman buildings,
yeah.
That's right. Now, the problem comes when you add to that this overlay, which is where various bits of what he found have been re-excavated over the years, these bits in yellow.
Trying to match things together, well, it doesn't. And just looking at this, I mean, it seems to be more, well, you match up one side, and the other side's out. You try and match up this side, and this side's all out. So basically, well, it just doesn't match.
And this is pretty critical to sort out the orientation and alignment of these walls to understand what's here.
So what are we going to do, Stu?
Well, there's only one way to really do that, and that's almost kind of throw away some of this stuff.
And draw a new map?
Exactly. Create our own map.
So you two have got quite a big job, haven't you? Stuart and Henry are going to make their own map of Castor and mark on it the precise location of all the known archaeology. A job made easier by the massive chunks of Roman wall still visible in the lanes around the churchyard. And under the watchful eye of Phil and Rakshar,
little bit of toil.
Our digger gets trench number 1 underway.
See, what we're getting is lots of reflections close to the surface.
John's a bit confused. His radar was showing very little here, but we've barely scratched the surface and we've got archaeology.
But is that there?
Which could be that, but
we just forget that.
Yeah, I am forgetting it.
This is reality. This will tell us whether there's anything there.
Is that Roman?
Already, pieces of Roman mosaic flooring called tessera are turning up.
Yeah, William said you get tesserae in the graves here. Ah, now what's that?
Finally, John figures out where his geophys has gone wrong.
We've got the Roman filter on.
What, you filter the Roman out?
Yeah, yeah.
That imaginary filter would have to be pretty effective, because when artists first came to Castor, he claimed to have found staggering amounts of Roman archaeology.
When Edmund Artis comes here in the 1820s, he refers to walls standing in considerable height. If we look at this, which is a newspaper report from Edmund Artis, 7th of December 1821.
So that's the local paper?
That's the local paper, Draycard Stamford News. And the report says, on the north side of the church, 5 rooms have been discovered, the walls of which are beautifully painted and from 10 to 11 feet high.
Wow.
But the floors are all destroyed.
That's massively high, isn't it?
So that's as high as the walls in here, actually.
Well, it's clear that when artists produced the plan of the site, there were Roman buildings under the rectory garden. And some excavations were conducted in the 1970s which confirmed little bits of wall through keyhole trenches, so we know there's stuff under here. But the problem is, these are only tiny little bits. We don't know whether this range extended further that way or further that way. And if you look at this lovely drawing that was done by artists at the time, this is what he found down here. You see the church in the background?
Yeah, you can see that just through those trees there, can't you?
So you can see it's quite a long way down. If we can find some of these features, we can then get the orientation, we can map them, and we can add them to that map that we've created of the site to find out if this is one building or a series of buildings.
So we're going to open our second trench here in the old rectory garden. And after some promising geophys, we've decided to put a third trench in this corner of the school field. This is another spot that our antiquarian artists and later archaeologists have explored. And it seems to have been an artist's favourite, because he drew the remains of this impressive Roman bathhouse he reckoned he'd found here.
One thing about excavating here is that there's something very identifiable we can latch onto. We know exactly where we are, but it's never actually been excavated at all in that direction, so we might get any Roman remains.
As we start to get to grips with this site, I'm getting a feeling that there's something special about Castor. Goodies for archaeologists seem almost guaranteed here.
This is an amazingly impressive group of finds, isn't it? And all from Peterborough Museum and all found at Castor.
That's right, yeah, all from the Castor area. I mean, what's particularly interesting is the collection of pottery here. There's a wonderful Hunt cup, for example. So cool because it has greyhounds or dogs chasing, here it comes, look, the hare.
Isn't that a lovely sinuous
It's
hair?
wonderful, isn't it? Yes.
But it's finds like this painted wall plaster that may be the key to unlocking the secrets of Castor.
Or this one, look, which appears to have some sort of image of foliage on it, with perhaps leaves being painted. The whole impression is of a really, really opulent building. Really opulent building, yeah.
You've got loads of Roman pottery, you've got Roman tile, you've even got a tiny bit of vessel glass. Don't know where it's come from.
Roman as well, yeah?
Oh, yeah, it's all Roman as far as I can tell. And there's a couple of Roman coins as well, which is sort of late 3rd century or thereabouts. I mean, most of the pottery is kind of late 3rd to 4th century. I mean, any time within that span, really. Well, I mean, it looks like a primary deposit. It's stuff that, you know, it's found where it was dropped sort of thing.
It may not have travelled far, but I've got an inkling that we might be looking at backfill down here. So,
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
because the pottery is very well distributed through it. The top of it's very loose. It's very homogeneous, thick deposit. So I think we may be looking at where artists dug one of his holes.
Really? So Matt could be onto a posh artist building. And as the rain at last gives way to sunshine, something's going on behind the church.
There must have been something here for them to rob and raid to use.
Yeah. What are you guys doing here? All the excitement's on the far side of the church. You're stuck round the back.
Yeah, but we've been looking at all the Roman stuff built into the church, the tile and the stonework and so on, and the idea that it comes from a huge Roman building that's somewhere round here at the back of the church.
Artists had a theory that all the Roman buildings to the north of the church were one giant structure. And Stephen thinks this is how it might have looked.
Well, it's a pretty enormous building, Tony. I mean, from where we're standing to the far side is 110 metres.
Crikey.
Well, if it's that big, it would absolutely dwarf the church, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. It would be 2 or 3 times bigger than the church.
So what could something that size actually be?
Let's go back to Artis. He called it a praetorium.
What's a praetorium?
Well, in Artis's terms, he were used to digging villas of fairly modest size, and this was the biggest thing that he ever saw and ever dug. And he gave the term praetorium, implying its size.
What does it mean?
Probably means a headquarters for some state or military function.
Have you geophysed this area yet?
Yeah, Jimmy's done over half of the graveyard, and to be honest, it's been a nightmare. Absolute nightmare with all the graves. It's been one of the most difficult surveys he's done. The problem I've got is what we're not seeing in these results are massive Roman walls, foundations or rooms, the same way we didn't this morning, you know, in Phil's trench.
If modern technology doesn't see the archaeology that you think may be there, an artist thought may be there, the one thing to do is to put a trench and have a look.
Yeah. Can we dig the churchyard?
We can dig in this churchyard.
Wow.
We've got one day. The diocese has given us permission. Very excited. We need to grab the charm.
That's for one day only.
One day only.
So we've got just a single day to find this mysterious Roman praetorium and not much evidence to go on.
Now, there's no modern graves here. Everything we can see is either late 18th or 19th century.
So presumably there's going to be bones under bones under bones.
Exactly, because there's going to be a lot of unmarked graves here. And the other thing is that there will be an awful lot of material that's sort of loose in the soil, because in the past it's been disturbed. When they've dug a grave, they will have hit graves that weren't marked, and bones will have been disturbed.
Disarticulated.
Disarticulated bones. They were far more robust about these things in the past, as long as they didn't leave the consecrated ground of the graveyard. And that's one of the things we have to make sure happens here, that everything that we dig out goes back in the ground.
Our efforts will be concentrated north of the church because that's where antiquarian Edmund Artis marked a series of mysterious structures. If we can confirm key parts of his plan, then we could be on the way to getting our praetorium, a very special Roman building. We've only got one day, Ben. What do you think our overall strategy should be?
Well, I think Artis was a very good archaeologist for his time, but I'm not so confident about this sort of floating building here.
Yeah.
Is it attached to the other buildings around it? What alignment is it on? We need a trench across there to try and tie it to the other buildings and sort out the alignment.
Yeah.
Then I think we need to do something similar in the west part of the churchyard, just here. Now, a few
That's
years
where you can see that wall in the path.
Yeah, well, a few years ago I cleaned up a bit of wall there, and there's definitely something there, but I didn't get much of a look at it. Is that a big building range as Artis depicts it?
By the 3rd century, Castor was perfectly placed, with Dura Brevi on one side and the imperial Fenland estates on the other. It may have become the centre of an economic boom area, and that could be the reason why a praetorium was built here. Since yesterday evening, we've been using this word praetorium, but quite honestly, I still have no idea what it means.
Well, in a sense, Tony, we're lumbered by what Artis, or how Artis used the term praetorium. And if we look at his book, he shows, for example, all the villas that he excavated, the ones here and here and here, as comparatively small structures. But look at the size of that structure, which is the praetorium, this building. It's, you know, much, much bigger.
So is he just using it to mean a big building?
That's exactly right. He's simply saying this is a walloping big building that I don't understand, but it's clearly significant and probably more significant than the surrounding villas.
But there are things called Pretoria around the Roman Empire, aren't there?
Of course there are, yeah. I mean, they're normally associated with the residences of state officials or even military officials.
The truth is, though, we still haven't a clue what's here, have we?
I reluctantly have to admit that that's the case. We know we've got something very big. We know it's surrounded by other Roman buildings, but I suppose a bit like artists, we're still struggling to put it in a sort of context, a framework.
We're still looking for clues. Still looking for clues.
Meanwhile, down in the school field...
And what measurement do we have?
Stuart has mysteriously changed into period costume.
6 metres 60.
Stuart, you look magnificent. Look at this. Look, the Colin Firth of Time Team. What exactly is it, though, that you're doing?
What we're trying to do is get back into the mindset of artists when he mapped this site in the early 19th century.
So you are our artist?
That's me, absolutely. And what I'm going to do is to get myself back into his mindset and the problems he would have had linking all together, all these bits of Roman finds and trenches into an existing map. So I'm going to try and do exactly the same with a modern-day existing map, but using the equipment that he would have available, something like a plane table, a sight rule, probably this magnifying glass eyesight going a bit, and various bits and bats of surveying equipment to see how easy or how difficult or what problems he would have encountered doing it.
But you're not on your own, are you? Hang on a minute. Look at this. Here he is, Matt, your long-suffering servant.
Sir.
A part with which I empathise somewhat. What are you going to be?
Well, all the measuring was done with these chains because we had to use these to measure across the fields, and there was lots of running around across the bogs and stuff. So basically, doing whatever Stuart tells me to do.
He's officially my chainman. That is the term that would have been used for the role that Matt has.
He's going to swan around, and you're going to do all the hard work.
I'm going to be legging it around the fields.
As Stuart and Matt go to work antiquarian style...
Other corner, please.
Hello, Phil. How's it going?
Phil and Jackie are searching for a structure with a mosaic floor that artists claimed was under the graveyard.
We do actually have a piece of the floor itself. If you turn that over, you can see that that is actually made of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 individual tesserae, all mortared together. That's the surface that they would have walked on. Right. Looks a nice piece. But we've also got the walls as well, because we've got wall plaster in red and a sort of grey-green as well. Look. So, with a bit of luck, if we carry on down, we should get the floor and maybe the walls without disturbing
the graves. That'd be a great relief to all of us.
With over 20,000 burials in this churchyard, it's not going to be easy finding any evidence for our praetorium. But in the rectory garden trench, which Faye's now taken over from Matt, we may be onto something.
What have you actually got going on over there, Tim?
Well, I seem to have this surface. It's got a few tesserae in it, but it's very pebbly and not very good.
But you've got archaeology.
Oh, yes, definitely archaeology.
Now, that's what's interesting, because where I am, I've got nothing. I've got a great big rectangular hole with no archaeology in it, and my only explanation for that can be that this is where artist shoved his trench, and he basically took everything away with him. And therefore, that's why we've got this line along here, which I think is a robbed-out wall. But what I need to do is find a depth for this, because I'm hoping that he may have left something at the bottom, like a hypercore system or something.
That would be good.
I think there's a fair bit more to do.
Yes.
So, some good news. Faye's trench may have a Roman structure, but there's still no sign of these massive walls we're hoping for. Everywhere on this site, we seem to be following in the footsteps of this chap Artis. Some of us quite literally.
I need some measurements from this line now so I can put them on the drawing.
Oh, excuse me, beg your pardon.
You're on time, Matthew.
I think the peg's come out.
Who put the peg in, Matthew?
Sorry, sir, it went up and again.
That's your wages, Dot.
Yes, Mr. Ainsworth.
Right, next the rectory garden next, Matthew.
Anything you say, Mr. Ainsworth?
Down at Tracy's trench, we're working in an area where artists drew this illustration of his Roman bathhouse excavation.
So how have you got on then, Tracy?
Well, we're getting there, I think.
Well, you've got walls and things showing now, which you didn't have before.
Yeah, we have, actually, that's lovely. It's got herringbone wall there, forming one side, and another one on this side, and it's forming a channel running up here to the remnants of this larger wall here. This has been robbed off, obviously.
OK, well, that all ties in nicely with bathhouses, doesn't it? So
it does.
I mean, it doesn't quite look like artists' drawing, does it? There's a lot more stonework and stuff there.
I think the problem is we don't know how long this was open after artists excavated it out.
So you think people came along and nicked it, basically?
Local houses, yeah.
Yeah.
But it probably didn't look quite like that when artists discovered it anyway. I mean, I doubt very much whether all the walls were this uniform height, for example.
Right.
All the pillars, again, were this uniform height. I think he got large chunks of this and has just helped us to sort of visualise the whole. I think there's a slight amount of embellishment going on here.
What we've got to do now is...
So we've got a sizable bathhouse, but we don't yet know the relationship between it and what's up behind the church. Back in the graveyard, Phil and Jackie are up against the clock, digging carefully around lots of human bones. They've now only a few hours left to get down to the floor of a potentially massive Roman structure.
We're definitely on the site of a building, but of course what we're encountering as we go down is lots of human remains.
Are these individual burials, or are they lots of bones on top of each other?
Well, we've had a lot of loose bones spread about, turning up all the way across here. But the difference here is, you can see we've got about 5 skulls all dumped in together in one place.
So do you think that that could be a grave digger who's cleared earlier graves, dug a pit, chucked these in so that more people can be buried?
Yeah, I mean, basically it looks like a charnel pit.
But we do have a problem, don't we, that we've got lots of bones and lots of smashed mosaic, but no structures whatsoever.
What we can be certain of is that in places the grave diggers have been through the Roman floor. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this sort of material. What we've got to hope is that they didn't destroy it all and that they've left some of it for us.
And that means digging deeper?
That means digging deeper.
Thankfully, Rakshaw's trench at the western end of the graveyard looks to have got something more substantial.
How's it going? It's going very well, actually. Put this trench in here to find what we thought was a wall coming through there. And lo and behold, we have a huge wall.
That was actually poking out the ground before you started,
It was.
wasn't
We
it?
knew that was there, but I didn't realise how massive it actually is. So we've got one wall here, which is running in that direction. And then where John is, we have the return, and that's running in this direction. So they should actually come out and converge around about here.
It's amazing, isn't it? This is the first time that we have seen anything like the kind of monumental walls that Edmund Artis saw.
Yeah, this is the only trench where we actually have huge walls.
And it's our failure so far to find other big walls that's becoming a major concern. For all the wonderful Roman buildings artists said were here, we haven't actually found much yet. Matt, this is a turn up for the books. We usually put you through about 24 hours of hell in these reenactments, but it's only been 3 and you're practically finished.
Well, I mean, once we got a system going between us, rolling out the chains and back again, it really didn't take very long at all.
And what have you found out?
Well, we've got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trenches open. We've got some bits of wall line exposed where the road's cut through. What we actually found out is that we haven't got very many walls at all. And if you look at what we actually know about this site from modern methods, these excavations in the 70s and so on, these are the only bits in black where bits of wall have been found. So, yeah, how do you join all those together? It's actually extremely difficult. We're having to rely an awful lot on what artists put on his plans and what he drew.
I imagine that very soon we would be able to paint this incredibly large Roman building just behind us, but I'm just starting to have my doubts. Beginning to disappear. The trouble is, on our Praetorium diagram, we're only certain of the black bits. All the other colours depend on our antiquarian's observations. So, how reliable do we now think he is? Beneath these bones, we're trying to find this Roman structure, marked as F on the plan that artist drew. It's here that he said he found a brightly coloured mosaic floor.
Phil, you know how I said I was getting a lot more building material and big blocks of tessera?
Oh, why?
Now I'm getting lots of pea grit, which is coming, this fine grit, and look what it's coming down onto.
Oh, good Lord. Well, that looks like a floor.
It looks very like a floor. And this is an in situ burial. That's lying directly on top of it by the look of it.
Oh, that is good stuff. I'll tell you what.
Blimey. We could be just inches away from finally getting evidence of a big Roman structure. And crucially, it's slap bang in the middle of our Praetorian plan. Back in the old rectory garden, Faye's getting really stuck in. And the sweat and graft is starting to pay off.
Hi there, Faye. Cool, this looks a bit different to yesterday. You're well down.
I am, but fantastically, we've got a huge, great big section of wall.
It's a big Roman wall, isn't it?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt.
And we were a bit worried yesterday about the sort of relative heights of all this. I mean, there's a surface very much higher than the Roman wall.
You can see where our artist put his trench, which is basically this line down in this section here. And I actually think that level there is where he was standing.
Really?
Yeah, which is why it's so compact.
With footprints?
Human,
What size boots did he have?
You're so demanding. I haven't got any footprints in there.
This is a wonderfully complex trench, isn't it? We can see where artist was actually digging for the first time and try and sort of understand how he unpicked the site and how he saw it, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
So this is actually a fascinating trench.
And it's also a very significant chunk of walling on the eastern side of what we think is one single enormous building.
Rakshaw's found something stunning as well.
Raksha, this is awesome. I love this. This is fantastic.
It looks a lot different than it did yesterday.
It is. It's a lot different.
Rakshaw's revealed a huge section of wall and a step foundation. The classic herringbone style shows that this is definitely Roman.
People were a bit sceptical yesterday. I talked about finding this big herringbone wall, and I suspect that people didn't quite believe me.
We did kind of think that you were going slightly crazy yesterday, but just to prove that you were right, as always, we carried on down, and lo and behold, here it is. As you can see, there's this huge wall coming through. We have this step foundation.
So what does this tell us, Ben, about the significance of the whole building? Does it add to our picture of the building?
Well, this looks remarkably similar to what was found on the other side of the church in the 50s.
Yes, I remember that. I've seen photographs of it.
It's on a similar line, and he found step foundations like this.
This is a photo of those step foundations excavated at Castor in the 1950s. They're more than 100 metres away from our trench, but they're virtually identical to those found by Raksha.
So I think we're looking at something that was constructed at the same time, basically.
And probably the same building, one large building rather than several separate
Well,
buildings.
you have to say, same construction techniques on a similar sort of line.
Matching dimensions.
Exactly. So suddenly we've got two bits of building, both of which have steps and both of which we think align on this slope. So again, that's pretty exciting stuff.
To think we've been walking across the floor of a Roman building that's been here for nearly 2,000 years is just astonishing.
And as the last few hours of our dig at Castor tick by, the news just gets better and better.
So what's the story of this trench then, Faye?
Basically, we have a Roman building, and actually down there we've got a room with what looks like a hypercore system.
So is this stuff that artists found that we've confirmed?
Well, artists did map on some walls, and he did suggest there was a hypercore system there, but the locations of the walls and the size of the walls aren't entirely right.
Right, so this is new, in fact.
Yeah, it is. And what's also new is we've got that higher level up there. We've actually got a two-level building.
So Castor has two clear Roman phases, which means the baths at the south end of the site were almost certainly built at an earlier date than the big building up on the hill, where Phil's now finished in the graveyard.
You've got to be pleased with that mosaic.
Yeah, I reckon I am, Tony, but I think I'm probably more pleased about the probable wall.
What wall? We haven't got a wall.
I know you can't actually see the wall, but you see those disarticulated pieces of bone down there? Well, when I actually got down to the edge there, I thought to myself, I wonder if it could be a robbed wall. So I thought to myself, I'll get Henry to plot out the position of Artis's building on the ground from the mapping. So that's what he's done. One corner of the building, probable building, is over there. See that red pegs over there?
Here?
Yeah. That's one corner there.
Yeah.
And then you see those red pegs there between the two gravestones over there?
It's truth all the way over
you
here.
can have them run, yeah, go
And
on.
all this is one building.
Now then, when you line up over there, give or take a metre, allowing for the scale, it puts the wall line straight through here. Not only that, the alignment of the tesserae is just slightly skewed round to the alignment of the church. And that's exactly what the tesserae and the plan do, exactly the same.
Yeah. So, regardless of what might be elsewhere, we know that there was a massive construction here. So it looks as though Artis was right after all.
Well, it looks like it, doesn't it, from what we can see, yeah.
Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses and behind-the-scenes insights.